I'll call this meeting to order. I call this special meeting of the Woodford County Fiscal Court to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Squire Taylor.
Here.
Squire Gentry.
Here.
Squire Marner. Squire Carl.
Here.
Squire Downing.
Here.
Squire Blackford.
Present.
Squire Gill.
Here.
Squire Brown.
Here.
So the first item is personnel matters, and what I'd be requesting from the fiscal court is to allow up to 100 hours of comp time accrual for 3 department heads who are not eligible for comp time for their extraordinary work during the April floods. The comp time hours that I shared with you were strictly for April only. A lot of that additional time was also spent in May and continues to this day. But one of the things that I wanted you all to know is that those 3 department heads in particular do not receive nor are eligible for comp time. Everyone else is either eligible for comp time pursuant to the ordinance at a 1-to-1 ratio, or eligible for overtime at a 1.5 time payout for hours worked and earned over 40 hours a week. So this would be 100 hours of comp time, up to 100 hours of comp time for April, a one-time allocation for these 3 department heads. So I'd open up the floor for any questions on that request to the fiscal court. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the request for up to 100 hours of comp time for the department heads as presented?
Motion. Second.
Motion by Squire Gentry, second by Squire Carl. Open up the floor for other questions. Seeing none, all those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay, and that motion carries unanimously. So what will happen is they will have those accruals approved and entered, and have the ability to use that comp time following this meeting. Thank you all for that. I think it's a small way to give something that was earned over and over again, and it's just a small fraction of the total amount of hours earned. Thank you. So I'm going to hold the executive session to either the end of this meeting, or even we would move it potentially into the fiscal court meeting. But I want to let you all know that the Woodford County Middle School track team will be with us for a special recognition, probably around the 5 o'clock hour. But I know that we have some budget questions in relationship to the Versailles Police contract in our budget, and we have Chief Rob Young with us. And so I'd like to open up the floor for discussion about any of those questions that folks may have. No questions for the chief? That's easy. It's easy enough.
Well, thank you.
All right.
Judge, you want me to stick around in case there should be anything?
I feel like there are, so if you wouldn't mind, please.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. County Attorney.
And maybe to go on and address it, Chief, if you could, obviously, I only have the interlocal agreement between the city and the county, and I don't have the one between the city and Midway. And our agreement indicates that the fiscal court's obligation is to be 38%. After, though, what we have for the school district, what the school district is contributing, and what Midway is, and Midway's was to, and both of those were to be, quote, fairly negotiated to reasonably reflect the level of service received, okay? And Could you tell us what those figures are currently in that contract? And again, are we going to be losing the school funding before this contract finishes in, I guess, 3 years or whatever it is?
I'll start out with addressing the school contract. So, we met with the school board and Superintendent Danny Atkins, and we discussed.
Hey, Chief, you want to turn your mic off, please? Oh, sure. Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So, myself and Mayor Dake had met with Superintendent Danny Atkins at the time. He's since retired. But we had a meeting with the superintendent, and we discussed Versailles Police Department continuing to provide SROs at the middle school and high school. And part of that was I wanted to, it was just a logical transition of them taking over all the schools. They had formed a Woodford County School Board, Police Department, and so they had initially been the elementary schools, and we were providing high school and middle school. Eventually that evolved. They got their police department up and running, and it was at this time that I requested that they then take over all the schools. There was a lot of questions asked and some coordination that kind of led me to the idea that it's probably time that they take over all the schools. So that decision was made, and they're in the process of filling those 2 positions. They authorized the 2 positions. So it's my belief, and I know they've already hired one SRO, one of our officers, who's going to be leaving, going to the school, and they're trying to fill the other vacancy. With that being said, we're going to be losing the monies that were coming from Woodford County schools. So the $75,000 will no longer be coming off of that.
So the math formula for the county, and that's the reason I raise this, is to be 38% of what the city budget was, less what you get from the school district and less what you negotiated with Midway. So if that contribution is lost, the 38% for fiscal court will ultimately result in a higher figure because you're no longer reducing it by the school contribution, correct?
Yes, and I think that was reflected in the budget that we had sent forward for the fiscal year 26. That was already reflected in there. So the budget figures that I presented during the last special session was the number that had the school's revenue removed from it.
But historically, where they've been able to have that as an offset, they will no longer, the fiscal court will no longer have that.
That's correct.
Number one. Number two, then the other component then is what Midway is contributing in their separate interlocal agreement / contract. And that was a negotiated percentage, correct? Just as ours was a negotiated percentage?
The Midway is, yes.
Yes. And the fiscal court's percentage would be based then, at least from an expectation standpoint, on what the city budget was, less the percentage that Midway had contracted for, correct?
That's correct.
And based on what we're hearing, that's now at issue, what Midway's contribution would be?
Yes, and there's some discussion that occurred between the Midway mayor, the Versailles mayor, and I think Judge Exec Kay was present during those discussions. So Midway was trying to renegotiate, and I think ultimately the decision's going to rest with Mayor Dake on what she decides to do to allow a different funding than was originally contracted.
And if a different funding is allowed then to make up the full budget, is it your understanding that means the fiscal court actual dollar amount contribution would increase because what was anticipated to be contributed by Midway will not be contributed?
According to the original agreement, yes. According to the original agreement, that would impact if Midway was allowed to pay less. Based on my budget, I didn't change the budget request, so the bottom line would need to be funded more so by either Versailles or Woodford County Fiscal Court. So the amount of the budget, bottom line, did not change. The amount that Midway was going to contribute could change.
But the fiscal court, based on what their understanding of what Midway's contribution would be, and Judge Kay and his budget would have prepared their budget to reflect what they would contribute 38% towards, which would be the city budget less the percentage that it was our understanding that Midway was contractually obligated to pay.
That's correct.
Now, and if the city were to allow Midway to pay a lesser amount, is it your understanding is that there would be on the city's part an understanding or hopeful desire that the county would therefore pay more toward the whole budget?
That's my understanding, but I'll be honest with you. I don't know what the final decision was by Mayor Dake, but it would be my understanding would be I think it's some $54,000 less that they'd be contributing would have to be made up by the contract between Versailles and Fiscal Court. So that would be 38% of a higher amount, that higher amount being the $54,000 that I believe Midway would not be paying.
If there is to be a new figure, I assume it needs to be, as is our figure, that figure must reasonably reflect the level of service that Midway is receiving. Do you believe that the current figure, the current percentage, reasonably reflects the level of service that Midway is receiving? And if so, what would you base that upon?
Well, the contract calls for them to pay, and this year was the first year it went up to 6.5%.
From what? So make sure we have the history correct.
So the history of it was the original interlocal agreement started in 2004, and it was just a set dollar amount.
Okay.
I think the original one was $30,000.
Okay.
Okay, that was long before I was here. Then the most recent interlocal agreement was signed in August of 2023. Originally, it was at 4.25%.
Okay.
That then increased fiscal year 25 to 5.5%.
Okay.
Fiscal year 26, the now proposed budget for fiscal year 26 was 6.5%. So if we're going to gauge if it reasonably reflects the level of service based on calls for service, I would say that's a bargain. Meaning their level of service is nearly 12% of call volume for all of Woodford County.
And I can tell from what I see from your officers, what hits my desk, calls I get and so forth. I don't have a percentage figure, but it's a lot. And I guess I want you to leave here and that it be communicated to the city of Versailles then. The concern I would have for the fiscal court, perhaps being asked to take on a greater role. We believe that the figure that was negotiated, as you said, was already a bargain, and it would be an even greater bargain. And I think there would be some sense of unfairness that the county would have to pick that up when that figure, that percentage figure, should reasonably reflect and represent the service that is provided by your department, and it is an excellent service. And so again, I certainly don't mean to speak for Judge Kay or the fiscal court, and they'll have their own attitudes and opinions. I just want to make sure there's a clear understanding of what may be presented to the fiscal court and the history behind it. And I appreciate you summarizing that for us.
I hope it makes sense, and by no means do I try to create any controversy, but the budget that I prepare, I try to prepare it based on the needs of the department. The bottom line is what I think fairly represents what I need. I don't put anything in there that's not needed for us to do our job and do it the best that I can. My job as the chief is to provide the best service countywide, whether you're Midway, whether you're in an unincorporated area or you're in Versailles. My job is to provide the best service possible, and that's what I try to do. And so that bottom line is what I think that was gonna cost. As far as how that's funded, those are based on contracts that are entered into by the different governmental entities, and I wasn't involved in those negotiations. But if you're asking me, service to cost, that's why I say it's a bargain.
Bargain.
When I see 12% of call volume being incurred to provide services to Midway, and they're only paying 6.5, in my mind, that's a bargain. I don't mean to harp on that, but I think that's the
No.
bottom line question. My job is just to give the bottom line what it costs.
No, I appreciate you harping on that, because I think that's a very salient point. And just one last thing, if I may, and Judge, if I may, when you said went from 4.5 to 5.5 and 6.5, that was negotiated, both sides negotiated that, correct? Versailles City and Midway City?
Yes, I wasn't present during those negotiations. It was my understanding that those negotiations occurred with both former mayors, both Mayor Thurman and Stacy Thurman and Mayor Brian Troggett. They had negotiated those amounts. And it was my understanding, there is a basis for that they used, and that basis was, my understanding, was that it was based on population. But I don't view it as population because of other factors, such as population may not reflect calls for service. Calls for service is impacted, and Midway has a big industrial area that they just had developed, including things like Lakeshore Learning, the restaurants. They may not be factored into the population figures, but they certainly result in calls for service. So that's why I don't strictly go on population. To me, calls for service are what matter when you're talking about volume of activity that's necessary to cover an area.
And I realize we may have a change of figureheads in this time frame, but was this issue, did it come out when it went from 4.5 to 5.5, or did it only come out when it went from 5.5 to 6.5? If you know.
I'm unaware of, Chief Murray and I were very close, and I don't remember that being a big issue when it went from 4.25 to
4.25, I'm sorry, yeah.
My understanding, the only time that I've had to deal with it or really heard a lot of discussion or concerns from Midway is when it went from 5.5 to 6.5.
Thank you very much for that history, Chief.
Yes, sir.
And thank you for all you and your department do.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Squire Taylor, you're recognized.
I had a couple of questions just based, just some, I guess, points of interest on this. Do we have the number of calls in the unincorporated areas of the county? If we're basing this on that question of how many calls?
What I have, what I can tell you is what I have in front of me. I didn't run that number, but what I do have in my packet, because I thought that this could be a concern, I did pull total call volume, and total call volume means zones 1, 2, 3, and 4. Our county's divided up into 4 separate zones. So I have the total call volume, and then I have Midway's call volume. I didn't separate out the unincorporated areas. That would be zones 2 and 3.
Okay, I think, I'm just interested if that is a difference, if that's our precursor of what portion. Maybe we need to be paying more, or maybe we need to be paying less on our portion of it. But if we don't know that, and then that's a determination as to why Midway's is at the rate that they're determined, I think it would be equitable. And the reason I asked that question is I think one of the things that's been lacking in how this contract's been negotiated in the past is not everybody's at the table at the same time. And this is not a reflection of the chief or anything else, but the fact that they're that they're negotiated separately leaves kind of some apples and oranges at times. And I think that's something that we've got to look at going forward on that. My other question on that, the change in the percentage, are they still going up in their contribution, the city of Midway, from last year's, even if without that additional, you say 50,000, 54,000, that maybe is in question at this point, comparatively? So if they were 5.5 this year, to take off that 54%, does that mean they're not paying any additional compared to last year? Or is that, Does that make sense? Right? If they're going
I
up,
think,
obviously,
I think what you're saying is, was there an increase from last year's to this year's budget for Midway's portion?
Yeah, with that withstanding, right? I think I was looking at it in the past, and I'm just wondering if that 1% difference would be eaten up entirely by that 54%, 54,000 comparatively, or if they're still making strides to increasingly have a larger share of their, not necessarily share, but increased amount of contribution.
I do believe that it would be going up from last year's budget to this year's proposed budget, even with a lesser amount. So I'd have to go back to see what was originally presented to tell you the exact number. There obviously was more of an increase originally, but what they're negotiated, it went from, I think, 454 to 401, and last year's portion was 351. I believe that's the
Okay.
number I have in front of me.
Thank you.
So there is still an increase.
Mr. County Attorney, sir?
I do want to make sure, though, that court and the public understand, there is a distinction between the interlocal agreement that the county reaches with the city and that Midway does, is there not, in that they have a percentage, period. We have an obligation, the fiscal court, for certain capital expenditures to share in. Is that in the Midway contract?
Midway does not pay anything towards capital.
Okay.
The county, Woodford County, funds our capital budget by a 50-50 split with the city of Versailles. And that's our capital budget, but there's also the building that was constructed.
Yeah, we don't have that, but I do want to make sure there's a comparison and a contrast. So Midway's is basically, as opposed to the fiscal court's interlocal agreement, whatever that budget amount is, a percentage amount of that, and that's it. The fiscal courts is a 38% amount after contributions, what used to be from the school board, and from Midway, 38% of that, plus 50% of these capital expenditures. So that's how the two contracts, interlocal agreements differ, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Squire Gill, you're recognized.
Thank you. As far as the school resource officers go, you say you provide two right now, one for the middle school and one for the high school?
We did up until the end of this school year.
And can you tell what the total compensation is for a school resource officer?
At the time, they were reimbursing us $75,000 for both of them. But their salaries and their benefits being retirement benefits, insurance, was about $233,000 total for both.
So we're going to save money. If those resource officers go to the schools, you will end up saving money by not having to provide, because they are getting a bargain.
Well, to save money, it would save money if I wasn't going to fill those positions or use those. What I'd like to do, and one of the biggest things, I think I discussed it during the last special meeting, one of the biggest complaints that we hear is our roadways. We see it in collisions, we see it in the fatalities, the injuries that occur in our roadway. I hear it in the complaints from our community. I try to be responsive. One of the things that I wanted to do, but I just didn't have the personnel to do it, is to form a dedicated traffic unit, a two-man unit that would be dedicated to traffic-related enforcement. And I think that would have a greater impact on our public safety and on our roadways, keeping folks safe, both youth and older folks. You know, I think I don't want to bring up bad memories, but we've lost, I think, 3 young people on motorcycle wrecks, not necessarily here, but also in Lexington. And 1 is too many, but 3 is just unbelievable to me. So that's why I don't want to just not fill those positions, but I want to reallocate some of our limited resources and personnel to doing traffic enforcement. And I think that's going to have a big impact. That's why to say it's cost savings, I don't know if it necessarily is. But if I wanted to start a traffic unit without using those added individuals, those officers, I would have to hire two. So there is a cost savings to that, but it's not going to be a deduction or reduction in my bottom line budget. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Well, I just like to say that in fiscal year 2025, the operating budget for the police department was $6,663,316. Add to that $637,420 in capital costs that were split between Versailles and the county that Midway did not contribute to. And so when we talk about percentage of calls, it makes sense that the percentage of calls the percentage of calls in Midway has gone up over the years. And it makes sense because the Fall Festival grows every year. They have I-64 with increased traffic every year. They had all the economic development in the county for a number of years. It was all in Midway. And then Midway College went to Midway University, and they have a bigger population. So they have lots of people coming into Versailles who could potentially need services. So I just think to say that, I don't know, I'm really surprised. I have to say I'm really surprised that they would say that this is not, I read it in the paper, this is not sustainable. I don't see how that's not sustainable. Their revenues are great in Midway right now, better than they've ever been. And I know, because I followed fiscal court for a lot of years before I was ever on the fiscal court, and I'm in my 11th year. And for a long time, Midway paid far less than the services they received. That all changed when they chose to become their own municipality. And so they had to take over the roads, but it seemed like they've always paid less. And looking at this, I mean, I was not happy with this police contract when it came out because they paid no capital costs. When you have probably 2 or 3 in Midway police officers, that doesn't, in a police cruiser, what they're paying just doesn't anywhere come near what it costs to provide services for them. So I hope, I guess we don't have any say in it, but I hope the mayor does not choose to renegotiate this because it is going to affect the county taxpayers. And I think Midway gets a sweetheart deal. Thank you.
I just want to add, Midway's been wonderful partners, and they've been wonderful to work with. This isn't an indictment of them. Mayor Grayson Vandergriff and I had a great conversation when all these things were coming up, these concerns. He called me up. We had a great discussion, tried to make it clear that they're happy with our level of service, and it wasn't an indictment of the police department. That's something I want to stress because I don't want our officers to hear these discussions and think it's in any way a reflection on what they're delivering. He was very complimentary. I'm very complimentary, and I appreciate him. But I want to make it clear, they've been good partners. Again, my job is to provide that bottom line amount, and how it gets paid for is up to the governmental leaders. And I try to be fiscally responsible. I was surprised to hear the concerns because it was the first time I heard of them. But the figures, in my mind, show they're getting a good deal. And I hope they stay with us because I like the people in Midway. I like their governmental body. This is a contract negotiation between the governmental leaders, and I try to stay out of that.
And Judge, I apologize. One last thing, and I'll tell you this will be it, if I may. Chief, one last thing, just to clarify again, and this is, I think, helpful for the court and the public. There is a dedicated officer for Midway. The zones there are other zones immediately available. Is that correct? So is Midway a zone unto itself?
To me, I hear these contracts and I hear discussions of an officer dedicated. In the contract, it says we're to provide 24/7 police services.
All right.
And we're supposed to have an officer there dedicated 22 hours. Previously, there was lesser hours, 8 hours, I think, originally. Yes. I don't know what that means. Because when I hear dedicated, if I go into dispatch, the dispatchers have a list of each zone and who's assigned to it. They have each officer that's on that shift because we have shift minimums. That's a dedicated officer in my mind. When we have 24/7 police coverage, that means if you have a call for service, we're going to be there 24/7, not 22 hours. At hour 23, it doesn't mean we don't show up when you have a need. That means no matter what time you call, we're going to be there. So if there's ever a renegotiation, I made that clear, and all the folks that I've spoken to, please remove that. Because what that means is there's different times, and police services are fluid depending on what the need is. And there are times that Midway, there may not be an officer sitting in there. That's because we have a serious incident in Versailles, and we're going to reallocate those resources. There's other times when they may be only paying for, expect one officer, but we're going to have a lot more officers. I go to Midway Fall Festival. We had 12 officers there at least on both days, and that didn't count me showing up there. That comes at no additional cost. That's 12 officers present. So having a dedicated officer doesn't mean that much to me. We're going to provide police services as the need arises, because we may, at any given shift numbers may be 5, they may be 6 officers. But if we have a serious incident, say a fatality wreck in Versailles, we're going to pull a Midway unit. Likewise, if we have that same incident in Midway, we're pulling from Versailles or county to put them in the places where they need to be. So dedicated officer doesn't mean that much. 24/7 means we're there when the call's needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Yes,
I have one
Squire
thing
Brown.
on it. Chief, when y'all annex new business and zones and stuff, do we still pay, if it's in the city, do we still pay the 38% and the 50%? Because I thought, I've been here long enough when we wasn't with y'all, and I thought it was something in there when you annexed, we were supposed to get, because it's not in the county anymore, and we're losing it from the county, and you bring it to the city. And it looks like we're really, if you look at it from where we started, where we are now, and really and truly y'all annex, if you want city water and things, you annex them. But 4 years ago, it worked the opposite. So do we still have to pay that money even though it's in town? I thought it changed, but apparently it didn't.
And I'll tell you, Squire Brown, my job is, like I said, to provide that bottom line, what it
Yeah.
costs. That gets into contract negotiations. I'm not aware of that provision in there. That would be one that I'm sure if it were in there, Judge
asking.
Kay would speak to Mayor Dake, and that's something that could be discussed, but I'm unaware of that being the case.
Other questions or comments for the Chief? Squire Gill?
I just want to say you have an excellent police force. They just provide such good services to Woodford County, and I'm so proud of them. And this is surely no indictment of the police.
Well, I appreciate that. It's been a highlight of my career. I'm 33 years into it. I'm long in the tooth, and I'm proud to be a part of it, and I'm proud of what they do every day, and I really mean that. It comes from my heart, and I see what they do. We don't pat ourselves on the back in the media. We just try to go out and do our job. I think you'd be amazed at what goes on a daily basis. Lord knows I am, and I'm just always surprised on how much goes on, and I think we live in a very safe community. And that's a partnership. I just met with somebody, and that partnership is because of the community, it's because of the police, and it's because of the support from our governmental leaders. So it's a collective effort, and it takes a fair amount of pushing back from folks that would like to come in here and probably set up shop to do bad things. We don't need bad actors here. So.
No, and Chief, since you mentioned that I was in the meeting with the mayors, we discussed this issue preliminarily prior to our budget meeting, where I asked you about that, and we discussed it, and the bottom line number is what we submitted in our budget. That's what we voted on. And I can say that across the board in Midway, Versailles, and Woodford County, that we fully support Versailles Police and Woodford County Sheriff's Office and our law enforcement team. And I think the one thing that is most important is that you have our support that we do work well on the budget and all other matters. And, I said it in the paper, since that was referenced. We've got 365 days to work out this situation. Our budget is set. It will not change before our second reading. It cannot change. It's been approved by DLG. It's a great budget, and it's one that funds law enforcement at a historic level, the highest level that's ever been in Woodford County, and that's because we believe in the work that you do. And we believe you keep us safe, so we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right. We will take a brief recess while we get prepared to recognize our honored guests.
I'm the bathroom.
Squire Taylor, if you would introduce our guests.
Come join us. The Woodford County Middle School girls track team.
State champions. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to have our newest Woodford County state champions here in the courthouse. The Woodford County Middle School Tiger Girls Track and Field team won the middle school state championship under the direction of head coach Chavi Munez. Hannah McCall broke her own meet records in 100-meter and 200-meter dashes. She holds 11 middle school state titles, more than any other track and field athlete in Kentucky. Hannah also holds the Woodford County High School record in the 100-meter dash, and she isn't even in high school yet. She got third place in the 100 meters at the KHSAA State Championship with a time of 12.12 seconds. Shelby Meadows placed second in the high jump with a jump of 4 feet 10 inches. Scarlett Dabney placed third in discus with a throw of 94 feet 1 inch, and third in shot put with a throw of 38 feet and 3.25 inches. Other standout performances were the girls 4x100 relay, fourth in the state. The girls 4x800 relay placed 8th, and Maddie Marcy was 10th in discus. Other athletes persevered despite serious setbacks. Shiloh Cash helped the 4x100 relay beat the school record, even though she was injured and had to be carried from the track. Avery Gill, part of the 4x800 relay, was injured, unfortunately, before the state meet and was still there to cheer on her teammates to the victory. These athletes have the characteristics that make Woodford County great: compassion, excellence, and dedication. Both Woodford County Middle School girls and boys track team also won the Central Kentucky Conference Championship. So tonight, we honor our newest state champions. So we have a recognition for superstar Hannah McCall, for Shelby Meadows, for Avery Gill, and Shiloh Cash. And we also have a recognition of each member of the team. So I'm going to come up and we'll present those, and we'll do a My understanding is you also have some recognitions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Both Jamie and I ran for Woodford County cross country and track, so I was honored to represent Woodford County as their coach, and it was an honor to coach these girls. They all worked hard. Girls who couldn't be here also worked hard. Both boys and girls were the conference champions, so we accomplished a lot of goals this year. I've just been very proud to coach these girls. They all worked hard. They did a great job representing Woodford County. So. Just this week, some of these girls were honored as all-state to the all-state first or second team. So, Hannah McCall, first team all-state. Alina Galdi, second team all-state. And Shiloh Cash, second team all-state. So thanks for having us today. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. You represent the best of Woodford County. We're so proud of you, and you put your names in the history books forever. So congratulations, and keep up the great work. We hope to see you here when you get a state championship in high school.
And the track team is putting on a 5K.
Pretty cool.
Do you want to?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We're going to prove that. We're going to get us that right here.
I don't know how to work it.
So I set this up really well. Jordan did. So now Heather McCall and Hannah McCall have a request to back the track event that it's going to be really hard for us not to vote unanimously for. Do y'all want to come talk about the event? You want to explain it to the court? You can turn on the mic there, please.
Okay, so Woodford County is known for racing. Around 10 horses in this year's Kentucky Derby had connections to Woodford County. The Woodford County Track Club would like everyone to lean into Woodford County's tradition for racing by backing the track. On Friday, August 15th, we will be hosting our first Back the Track 5K. Proceeds will go to support the mission of the Woodford County Track Club, which supports the track and field program for elementary, middle, and high school youth. On the day of the race, we will also have some exciting events before the 5K. Children ages 8 and under are invited to join the stick horse races sponsored by Gray Ridge Farming Riding Academy. Each children will get their own stick horse to race and keep. You don't need to sign up for this in advance, but we are interested in whether you want to participate so we can get a general head count. You'll sign up and sign in the waiver on race night for stick horse race. The cost to participate is $5. Payment for the Woodford County Track Challenge will be made on the night of the race. Cash, credit, debit, or card accepted. We also are hosting something we call the Woodford Track Club Challenge events. We plan to hold a series of fun special challenges events on the night of the race, 5:30 to 7. All levels are welcome to participate and test your skills in various track and field disciplines. The Woodford Track Club, with the help of high school track team, will help organize and run the events. You don't need to sign up for this in advance, but we are interested in whether you want to participate. You'll actually sign up and sign the waiver on race night for the Woodford Track Challenge.
Excellent. So I need a motion for us to approve the Back the Track event to support our track athletes in Woodford County. Motion by Squire Brown, second by Squire Blackford. Seeing no questions, all those in favor, please vote and signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And the motion carries. So Hannah, we really appreciate you coming up and speaking about the event, being a state champion, doing all the big things that you're doing at your age, speaking in front of the fiscal court. We're honored by you being here. We're inspired. I'm inspired to see you doing big things and doing things like this, representing your team, your school, your family, and our community, and speaking at the fiscal court. So if you ever need anything, we're right behind you all the way.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
And I have some waivers if someone would want some. Flyers,
Yeah.
if anyone would want some.
Yeah, please, if you
Absolutely.
want to hand them to Squire Taylor there on the end, he can pass them around to us.
Thank you so much. And Judge, I just want to point out that they did say that they'd have medical support on there for the event. So if any of us do participate in any of those track events, we'll be safe.
In case you pull a muscle.
Yeah.
Need oxygen, whatever.
I was going to say a muscle.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. And you're more than welcome to stay, but you're also more than welcome to be excused.
We're headed to summer track practice.
More track practice. Well, keep up the great work. We're proud of you, Hannah. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we will likely take up our executive session in the full meeting of the fiscal court. We'll probably do that towards the end of the meeting. We've got about 5 minutes before we reconvene in the full fiscal court. So we will start promptly at 5:30, but we are adjourned.